Second. body.html. So as you can see, we can put any JavaScript code between these curly brackets. As long as this code results in a value, we can insert it into this HTML. Let's remove the button and the paragraph that we used as an example and save. And let's check our website. We'll open the browser and go to our Chatbot project. And now we created the elements for the top section of the Chatbot project, the text box and the button and the paragraph that we used as an example. Let's remove the button and the paragraph that we used as an example and save. And let's check our website. We'll open the browser and go to our Chatbot project. And now we created the elements for the top section of the Chatbot project, the text box and the send button. So don't worry about how it looks for now. Later in the course, we're going to style this with CSS and make it look like the final project. Let's go back to our code. And next, React has a special syntax we can use to insert a component. Instead of using curly brackets and running the function, we can type this code, less than, and then the name of the component, capital C chat input, greater than, and then less than slash chat input, greater than.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform. Describe.
So this is called the component syntax. This does the same thing as the code above. It runs the chat input function and then inserts the result into the HTML. If we save and we check our project, you'll notice that that syntax does the same thing, and it creates another text box and button. Let's go back to our code. And again, this code does the same thing as this code. Now, this syntax has a big advantage. This actually looks like an HTML element. It has an opening tag and a closing tag. So you can think of this like we're creating our own HTML element called chat input. HTML provides us with some default elements like div, input, and button. And now using React, we can actually create our own HTML element like chat input. Then we can use our own HTML elements to build the website instead of just the default HTML elements. And this is actually one of the main ideas of React. We can create our own HTML elements. So when using React, we should use this component syntax instead of running the component function directly, because this syntax lets us create our own HTML element. And again, we can use the self-closing element shortcut like we did up here. If there is nothing inside this element, we can remove this closing tag. And inside the opening tag, at the end, we can type space and slash. And now we can remove this example code above. And let's save and check our project. And that creates the top section of the Chatbot project. So go back to VS Code. And we mentioned in the previous lesson that React helps us create websites easier. And this is another way that React helps us create websites easier. It lets us split our website into smaller pieces or components. And this lets us work on a small piece of the website at a time. Before we create the rest of the project, we're going to improve our code a little bit. First, notice that in this component, we're using a div to group these two elements together. However, this is also going to insert an extra div element into our website. So if we go to our website and right-click and click Inspect, and we're going to go to the Elements tab, and we're going to go to our container here, and we're going to expand it. So notice here that we have a bunch of extra divs on this website. So what if we don't want to insert these extra divs? What if we just want to insert the text box and the button on our website? Let's go back to our code and learn how to do that. React has another way to group elements together called a fragment. To use a fragment, we can remove the word div and div from the closing tag and just have a less than greater than and a less than slash greater than. We can remove the word div. And React has another way to group elements together called a fragment. To use a fragment, we can remove the word div and div from the closing tag and just have a less than greater than and a less than slash greater than. So this is called a fragment, and it groups the two elements together so we can return it from the function, but it won't insert an extra div. So if we save this code and then go to our website and take a look at the HTML, you'll notice now we have one less extra div on the website. Let's go back, and we can also use a fragment down here. If we don't want to insert this extra div, we can remove it and remove it at the bottom and just use a fragment. If we save and check the website, now we no longer have those extra divs. We have our container and we just inserted the text box and the button. So that's fragments. It allows us to group elements together without creating an extra div. Let's go back to our code. And since this variable no longer contains a div, let's rename it. So right now we're building a chatbot application or an app. So let's rename this variable to app instead. And here as well, we're going to render the app and save. So again, in React, when returning multiple elements or saving multiple elements, we can use a fragment to group them together. And this makes our HTML a little bit cleaner because it doesn't create an extra div element.
Thinking about a degree in cybersecurity? Don't sleep on this. UMGC is waiving their application fee through June.
Next, another improvement we can make is to add a placeholder to the text box at the top. So the gray text inside the text box is called a placeholder. It tells us what to type inside the text box. And when we start typing, it will disappear. To create a placeholder, we give this input element an attribute. So at the end, we're going to type the attribute placeholder equals double quotes. And then inside these double quotes, we're going to put the text that we want, which is send a message to Chatbot. If we save this code and look at our website, now we have a placeholder in the text box. And when we start typing in it, it will disappear. So the placeholder is working. Now, there is one problem here, which is if we remove this text, you'll notice that this placeholder is too long and it's getting cut off. To fix this, let's make this text box wider. We'll go back to our code. And to make this input wider, we're going to give it another attribute. So at the end, we'll type another attribute called size equals double quotes. And this sets how many characters can fit in this input. By the way, a character is just a letter, number, or symbol. Let's set the size to 30 characters and save and take a look. Okay, so that looks pretty good for now. Again, don't worry about how this looks. We'll style it later in the course using CSS. This to 30 characters and save and take a look. Okay, so that looks pretty good for now. Again, don't worry about how this looks. We'll style it later in the course using CSS. So we just created our first component or our first piece of the website, which is the section at the top. Now let's get some practice and create more components. Let's go back to the final chatbot project. And let's ask ourselves, how can we split up the rest of this website into pieces? Another piece of this website could be one chat message here. So let's create a component for this piece of the website. We'll go back to VS Code. And to create a component, we're going to use a function. So down here, let's create a function. And let's name it capital C chat, capital M message, brackets and curly brackets. So remember, a component name must start with a capital letter, and we use Pascal case. So each word starts with a capital letter. Now, inside this function, we're going to return the HTML for this piece of the website or this component. So let's also type brackets and enter. So we can write the HTML on multiple lines. And now, each chat message has two things, some text and a profile image. Since we have multiple things inside this component, let's group them together using a fragment. So we can return one value from this function. So we'll type less than, greater than, enter, and then less than / greater than to create a fragment. And now inside here, each message has some text. So let's create the first chat message in our project. We'll go back to the final project, and let's just copy paste the text from the first message here, which is hello chatbot. So we'll select this and then copy by pressing Control C on Windows or Command C on Mac. And then inside our code, in the chat message component, we're going to paste by pressing Control V on Windows or Command V on Mac. And let's fix the indent by pressing Tab at the start. Next, each chat message has a profile image. To create an image, we can use an HTML element called img. So let's create a new line, and we're going to type less than img greater than, and then less than / img greater than. So remember that in JSX, every element has to have a closing tag. And again, we can use a self-closing element shortcut like we did down here. If there's nothing inside this element, we can remove the closing tag and then just add a space and a / at the end of the opening tag. And now we have the two things that we need for each chat message, the text and an image. Next, we need to tell the computer which image to load. Right now, if we look at our final chatbot project, we have two images that we use, but we currently don't have these in our project. So let's download them. We're going to right-click this first image and then click Save Image. And we're going to find the folder that contains all of our code. So for me, it's on the desktop, and it's in the folder React-Course, and we're going to save it inside of this folder. And same thing for this robot image. We're going to right-click and click Save Image, go to the React-Course folder, and we're also going to save the robot image. And now if we look at our code, we should have two images inside our project, user.png and robot.png. And now let's go back to our code. To load an image on the website, we need to tell the computer which image to load. To do that, we're going to give this image element an attribute called src, or source, equals double quotes. And inside these double quotes, we're going to tell the computer which image to load. For the first chat message, the image is the user image. So let's type this file name, user.png. So this will look for a file called user.png beside the current HTML file. This is the current HTML file, so we'll look for user.png beside it, which is right here, and then it's going to load this image on the website. Okay, so we created a component for a chat message. Now let's insert this component on the website. We're going to scroll down to the app, and let's insert this component using the component syntax like we did up here. So we'll type a new line and type less than, and then the name of the component, which is capital C chat, capital M message. And currently we don't have anything to put inside this component, So we use the self-closing element shortcut like we did up here. So now let's save and check our website, which is this tab. And let's close the console so we can see it. And we created a chat message. However, we have a few problems here. The first problem is that the profile image is too big. To make it smaller, we're going to go back to our code. And inside the img element, we're going to give it another attribute called width equals double quotes. And let's try setting the width to 50 and save. And then check our website. And that looks close enough. Another problem is the chat message is appearing on the same line as the chat input, but in the final project, we want it to appear below. To fix this, we'll go back to our code, and inside the chat message component, instead of using a fragment to group these elements together, we're going to change it back to a div. So inside, we'll type div, and inside here, /div.
Apparently you can go from 0 to a complete site in just a single prompt with Wix Harmony. I don't know if this is going to be possible. Or
The reason we're using a div is because in HTML, a div is known as a block element. A block element will always take up an entire line by itself. So if we group this in a div element, instead of appearing beside the chat input, the div is going to take up an entire line by itself. So it's going to take up the entire line under the chat input. So let's save this code and then check our website. So now this div is save this code and then check our website. So now this div is taking up this entire line. If we right click and click inspect, and then click this arrow icon in the top left, and then click on this div, you can see that this div now takes up this entire line. So now we have the layout that we want. So in React, we still use divs for layout purposes. If you want to learn divs, layout, and HTML in more detail, you can check out my HTML and CSS full course in the video description. So now we created our first chat message. Next, let's create the second chat message. We'll go back to our code. And instead of creating a whole new component, we can actually reuse our chat message component. Components are actually designed to be reusable. To reuse this component, we don't want the message to be hello chatbot every time. We want to be able to display different messages in this component. To do that, we can give our component an attribute. So down here, we're going to go to the chat message component, and we're going to give it an attribute. So this works just like HTML attributes. We're going to give our attribute a name. Let's call it message equals double quotes. And inside these double quotes, we're going to give the attribute a value. Let's put the text for the first message, which is hello chatbot. So let's select this code and then copy, and we're going to paste it inside here. So now we have an attribute called message with the value hello chatbot. So again, you can see that this syntax looks like HTML. We can even add our own attributes. Now that we added this message attribute, how do we access it inside this component and use it? To do that, we're going to use a feature called props. Every component function gets one parameter up here called props. This props parameter is an object, and it contains all the attributes that we give to this component. So up here, let's actually console.log props. And it contains all the attributes that we give to this feature called props. Every component function gets one parameter up here called props. This props parameter is an object, and it contains all the attributes that we give to this component. So up here, let's actually console.log props to see, and it contains all the attributes that we give to this component here, called props. This props parameter is an object, and it contains all the attributes that we give to this component. So up here, let's actually console.log props to see what it looks like. Let's save and then open our website and check the console. And you'll see that props is an object and it contains the attributes that we gave to our component. So here we have the message attribute and it has a value hello chatbot. So the attribute name is saved as the property and the attribute's value is saved as the value of this object. So let's go back to VS Code. And using this props object, we can access our attributes. By the way, props is short for properties. We call this props because the attributes are saved as properties in this object. So now to access the message attribute, we can remove this. We call this props because the attributes are saved as properties. Props object saved as message attribute and it has a value attribute. Let's save and you'll see that props is an object. To see what it looks like, let's save and then open our website and check the console. And you'll see that props is an object and it contains the attributes that we gave to our component. So here we have the message attribute and it has a value hello chatbot. So the attribute name is saved as the property and the attribute's value is saved as the value. Save and then open our website and check the console. And you'll see that props is an object and it contains the attributes that we gave to our component. So here we have the message attribute and it has a value hello chatbot. So the attribute name is saved as the property and the attribute's value is saved as the value of this object. So let's go back to VS Code. And using this props object, we can access our attributes. By the way, props is short for properties. We call this props because the attributes are saved as properties in this object. So now to access the message attribute, we can remove this and type props dot and the attribute name, which is message. And let's save this in a variable so we can use it later. So at the front, we'll create a variable using const, name it message equals props.message. And we'll add a new line to separate the code a little bit. Now, instead of displaying hello chatbot every time, let's display whatever's in the message attribute. So we'll remove this and let's insert this variable into this element. To do that, we can use curly brackets and type the variable name message. So again, we can put any JavaScript code between these curly brackets, and as long as it results in a value, it will insert it into this element. So now let's save. And we'll check the website. And it displays the message, hello chatbot. That's the message attribute that we gave it. Let's go back to our code. So that's props. Just like a normal HTML element, we can give attributes to our component and then access these attributes using this props object.
You don't know what an AI work management platform is? Yikes. Here's 3 new AI-powered changes to the Monday platform.
So props are really useful because props make our component reusable. For example, let's try creating the second chat message. To do that, we can just create another chat message component. So down here, let's type less than chat message / greater than. And we just need to give it a different message attribute. So here, we'll give it an attribute message equals double quotes, and we'll copy paste the second message in the Chatbot project. We'll go to our browser and go to the Chatbot project, and let's copy and paste the second message. We'll select it and then copy, and inside our code, in the message attribute, we're going to paste. So this will save the message, hello, how can I help you, inside props. And then we get it out of props and insert it into the component. Let's save and check the website and go to our tab. And now we created the second chat message. So let's go back to our code. And you can see that props make our component reusable. We can reuse this component, but just give it a different attribute or prop. and it will display a different message. Let's get some practice and use props to create 2 more chat messages. Feel free to pause if you want to try it yourself first. More chat messages. Feel free to pause if you want to try it yourself first. So down here, let's create our third message using less than chat message project. And finally, copy paste from mine. And now if we check our website, chat messages component. Different. These 2 messages are from the chatbot. So there are 2 differences here. The profile image is a robot, and the image is on the left. To create this, we can add another prop to chat message. Let's go back to VS Code. And for each chat message, we're going to add another attribute. And let's call this attribute the sender equals double quotes. This attribute tells us who sent the message, and we can use this to determine which image to load and where to place the image. So if we sent the message, let's make the sender the user. And for the second chat message, we're going to add another sender attribute equals double quotes. And the second message is from the chatbot. So let's make the sender attribute the robot. And we'll do the same thing for the third and fourth message. We'll give it a sender attribute. The third message is from the user. So let's make the sender user. And the fourth message, sender equals double quotes. This message is from the robot. So let's make the sender robot. Next, let's access the sender attribute inside our component. To do that, all the attributes are saved inside this props object. To access the sender attribute, we can type props.sender. So this gives us the value of the sender attribute, which is either user or robot. So let's save this in a variable so we can use it later. Type const, and let's call it sender equals props.sender. So now that we have the sender attribute, let's use it to decide which profile image to load and where to place this image. To do that, we can just use an if statement. So inside here, we can type if brackets and curly brackets. And inside these brackets, we're going to check if the sender is equal to the string robot. By the way, by default, if the attribute just has double quotes like this, the value is a string. So here, the value is going to be the string user or the string robot.
With Framer, the things you design become real. Framer feels like a design tool, but it ships fast, modern.
So now inside our component, if the sender is the robot, we're going to return some different HTML. So let's type return brackets so we can write this HTML on multiple lines. And let's just copy paste the HTML from down here and modify it. So we'll select this HTML and then copy. And then inside this return, we're going to paste. And let's also select these lines and press tab to fix the indenting. So the first thing we need to change if the sender is a robot is that we want to load the robot image instead. So we already downloaded the robot image here. To load it, we're just going to change the src attribute or the source attribute of this image. So we're going to change this from user to robot.png. And we also want this image to be on the left. So let's just move this image before the message. So we'll select this code and then cut by pressing Ctrl X on Windows or Command X on Mac. And then before the message, we're going to paste by pressing Ctrl V on Windows or Command V on Mac. And we can remove this extra new line. So as you can see, inside a component, we can use any JavaScript feature like if statements, and we can return a different HTML. And whatever we return will be inserted inside the element here. So now let's save this code and then check our website and then open our tab. And you can see that now we have two messages from the chatbot. It loads the robot image and it puts the image on the left. We'll go back to our code. And using this sender prop, we're able to reuse this component to create a chat message from the robot. So again, props make our component reusable. And that's it. If we scroll down, using components, we split up the website or the app into smaller pieces, like the chat input section at the top and each chat message. And we created all the HTML that we need for this project. The last thing we're going to learn in this lesson are some shortcuts that are commonly used in React. And we can use these to clean up our code. First, let's scroll up to the chat message component. So instead of doing const message equals props.message, we actually have a shortcut for this in JavaScript. So down here, we can just type const curly brackets, and inside we can type message and make it equal to props. So this takes the message property out of this object and saves it in a variable called message. So this does the same thing as this line above. This code is a shortcut for this code. And this shortcut is called destructuring because we're taking stuff out of this object. We're deconstructing it. We can also use this shortcut with the sender property to add another property to take out of this object. After the first property, we can type comma and the second property sender. So this will get the message property and the sender property out of this object, and it will save it in a message variable and a sender variable. So this line of code is a shortcut for these two lines above. So now let's actually turn these two lines into comments or comment out these lines. At the front, we're going to type double slash, and at the front here, we'll type double slash. By the way, if we start with double slash, it will turn this code into comments, and it will be ignored by the computer. So we'll just keep this here as a reminder that this is a shortcut for these two. Next, JavaScript has an even shorter shortcut for this. Since props is a parameter up here, we can just destructure it directly up here. So here, instead of the props object, we can just type curly brackets directly, and then type message, comma, and sender. This takes the message and sender properties directly out of the first parameter, and then saves them in a variable called message and a variable called sender. So it does the same thing as this code down here, but it's an even shorter shortcut. We're destructuring the parameter directly at the top. So this shortcut is used a lot in React tutorials and documentation. So it's useful to know how this works. So let's comment out this line here. At the front, we'll type /. So we remember that this code is a shortcut for this line of code and these 2 lines of code. Now let's save and check our website to make sure that everything is still working. So that looks good. We'll go back, and that is the destructuring shortcut. It allows us to take properties directly out of an object.
You're one sentence away from launching your website with Base 44. Since the beginning of the internet, there's never been such a fun, fast, and intelligent way to launch online. Landing pages, content hubs, e-commerce sites.
Next, we're going to learn how to use if statements directly inside JSX. So currently, we have some JSX here, and we put an if statement outside of this JSX. However, this means we're duplicating some code, like the div and the message. To make this code more reusable, we can actually move this if statement directly inside the JSX down here. So what we want to do is, if the sender is a robot, we want to put the image before the message. So down here, let's go before the message and press enter. And we're going to type curly brackets, and we're going to insert the if statement directly inside here. So here, before the message, we want to do something like if the sender is equal to the string robot, we're going to insert this image. However, we can't actually use the word if inside of these curly brackets. Instead, we need to use another feature of JavaScript called a guard operator, or AND. In JavaScript, you can write value 1 and value 2. If value 1 is true, then the result will be value 2. So this works just like an if statement, except we can write it on one line, and it results in a value. So if you want to learn more about this feature, I cover it in the Booleans lesson of my JavaScript course, and you can check out that in the video description. For now, the only thing we need to know is with that in the video description. Booleans lesson of my JavaScript course, and you can check out that in the video description. For now, the only thing we need to know is we can use AND as sort of an if statement in our JSX. So first, let's remove this. And then we're going to use AND to insert this if statement directly inside the JSX. Because we want. And for the second chat message, the second sender and code inside our, you can type it. So let's line in and you can see that let's create a components section we need short doing JavaScript. And inside we enable a short and that have here this in its documentation. Now code everything, and that is we duplicate this code that is a robot. The message, insert the if statement for the message. This means we're duplicating some code, like the div and the message. To make this code more reusable, we can actually move this if statement directly inside the JSX down here. So what we want to do is, if the sender is a robot, we want to put the image before the message. So down here, let's go before the message and press enter. And we're going to type curly brackets, and we're going to insert the if statement directly inside here. So here, before the message, we want to do something like if the sender is equal to the string robot, we're going to insert this image. However, we can't actually use the word if inside of these curly brackets. Instead, we need to use another feature of JavaScript called a guard operator, or AND. In JavaScript, you can write value 1 and value 2. If value 1 is true, then the result will be value 2. So this works just like an if statement, except we can write it on one line, and it results in a value. So if you want to learn more about this feature, I cover it in. For now, the only thing we need to know is we can use and as sort of an if statement in our JSX. So first, let's remove this. And then we're going to use and to insert this if statement directly inside the JSX. So the first value is going to be our if condition, which is sender equals the robot. So we'll check if the sender is equal to the string robot. And then we're going to use and. So if this is true, the result is going to be the second value here. So here, if the sender is a robot, we want to insert the robot image. So let's just copy and paste this code. We're going to select this, and then copy it. And then down here, after and, we're going to paste. So again, the way this works is if the value on the left is true, then the result will be the value on the right. So this and is sort of a shortcut for this if statement, and it lets us insert if statements directly inside our JSX. So let's actually comment out this if statement out here. So we remember that this code is a shortcut for this code.
Okay, great. Wait, were you even listening? You haven't taken a single note.
So here, before the if statement, we'll type slash and star, and after the if statement, we'll type star and slash, and remove the indent. So this is known as a multi-line comment. All the code between these two stars will be ignored by the computer. So now let's save and check our website. And as you can see, if the sender is a robot, we're going to add an image on the left before the message. So now one problem here is that we're also showing the user's profile image at the back, but we only want to show one profile image. We'll go back to our code. And here, we only want to show the user profile image if the sender is the user. So let's insert another if statement down here. Feel free to pause this video if you want to try it yourself first. Statement profile image. And here, we only want to show the user profile image if the sender is the user. So let's insert another if statement down here. Feel free to pause this video if you want to try it yourself first. down image. And here, we only want to show the user profile image if the sender is the user. So let's insert another if statement down here. Feel free to pause this video if you want to. Let's insert another go back to our code. And here, we only want to show the user profile image if the sender is the user. So let's insert another if statement down here. Feel free to pause this video if you want to try it yourself first. So at the front, we'll type open curly bracket. At the end, a close curly bracket. And at the front, we're going to type the if condition. So we'll check if the sender is equal to the string user, and then we'll type and. So if this is true, then we will show this image. If this is not true, we will not show this image. So this code is a shortcut for this code. Let's save and check our website. And it works. The robot image is on the left, and the user image is on the right. So let's go back. Using the guard operator, or and, we can insert an if statement directly inside our JSX. Next, we're going to do some code cleanup. So let's scroll up, and we're going to go to the chat input component first. So you notice that in here, this line is a little bit too long. To make our code easier to read, we can actually put each attribute on its own line. So here, we'll type enter to put placeholder on its own line, and here we'll type enter to put size on its own line. And let's also type enter at the back, so the attributes are on their own lines. And then let's add an indent in front of these attributes by pressing tab and pressing tab. This makes it clear that these attributes are part of this element. And we also want to make sure that these two are vertically aligned. This makes it easy to see where this element starts and where it ends.
Websites your competitors don't want you to know, part 2. All you do is go to this website, and it lets you find out exactly.
Next, let's scroll down to the chat message component. And notice that these two lines of code with the and are also a bit too long. To improve this, we can surround this value with brackets. So we'll type open bracket, and at the end, close bracket. And then we can put this code on its own line. So here, we'll type enter, and at the end, we'll type enter. So this will still have the same value, but the brackets allow us to put the code on multiple lines. We'll do the same thing for the second image. We'll surround it in brackets, open bracket, and close bracket, and we'll put this value on a separate line so that it's no longer too long. Next, let's scroll down even more to the app variable, and you'll notice that these lines are also a bit too long because of the attributes. Again, we can put each attribute on its own line. So here, we'll put message on its own line and sender on its own line, and we'll put the end of the component on its own line so that this is vertically aligned with this. And let's also add indents before the attributes. So we'll press tab and tab. So it's easy to see that these attributes are part of this component. And we'll do the same thing for the other 3 chat messages. So we'll put this on its own line and add indents. And put this on its own line, add indents, and put this on its own line and add indents. And save. And check our website, and everything should still work because we just changed the formatting of our code. So let's go back. And that's how we avoid our lines being too long. We can put each attribute on its own line, and we can also surround a value with brackets and put it on its own line. Finally, down here, instead of using a variable to save our app, a best practice is to use a component to create this app. So here, let's create a component using function. And we'll name it capital A app, brackets and curly brackets. And then this component will return all of this HTML. So we'll return brackets so we can write it on multiple lines. And we're going to move all this code up here. So let's select this code, and we'll cut. And inside the return, we're going to paste. And we can select these lines and press Tab to fix the indenting. So now we're going to use this component instead of the variable to create our app. So down here, let's remove this variable. And then inside render, we're going to create the app. We can type less than capital A app greater than, and then less than / app greater than. So this creates an entire chatbot application. And then we give this to React to display on the website. And again, since there's nothing inside this component, we can use the self-closing element shortcut. So we can remove this closing tag. And then at the end here, we can type space and /. And now let's save and check our website. And it displays the app on the website. Let's go back to our code. So a best practice is to use a component called app to create the website, because it gives us access to extra features of components, like props. And also notice that we can have components inside a component. So this lets us split up a website into smaller and smaller components, or smaller and smaller pieces. So again, React helps us create websites easier, because it lets us work on a small piece of the website at a time. In the next lesson, we're going to learn a very important feature of React called state. State lets us make our website interactive, and it will let us add new chat messages to our website. And that's the end of this lesson. In this lesson, we learned that a component is just a piece of the website. We also learned that components let us create our own HTML elements. We started the Chatbot project. We split the chatbot into chat input and chat message components. We learned props, which let us insert values into components and make components reusable. We learned the destructuring and guard operator shortcuts. We did some code cleanup and split longer lines into multiple lines. And we created an app component, which represents the entire application. Thanks for watching so far. If you find this course entire application. Thanks for watching so far. If you find this course valuable, you can support the channel by liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing. You can also check out the premium version of this course, where you'll get all the lessons ads-free, broken down into small videos, as well as additional lessons and more projects that are not in the public React course. Currently, the premium course contains 11 lessons, and I'll be adding more lessons in the future. You can also get a certificate of completion, create comments or questions on specific topics, get progress tracking, search, and course notes. You can also check out the membership, where you can get this course ads-free, separated by each lesson, AI videos, backend tutorials, and more. Thanks again, and let's continue with the course. Here are some exercises to help you practice what we learned in this lesson.